أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تقربوا مال اليتيم إلا بالتي هي أحسن حتى يبلغ أشده وأوفوا الكيل والميزان بالقسط لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولو كان ذا قربى وبعهد الله أوفوا ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تذكرون وأن هذا صراطي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولا تتبعوا السبل فتفرق بكم عن سبيله ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تتقون صدق الله العظيم. Now I'm going to read the translation of what I read. And do not approach the orphan's property except in a way that is best until he reaches maturity. And give full measure and weight in justice. We do not charge any soul except with that within its capacity. And when you testify, be just, even if it concerns a near relative. And the covenant of Allah fulfill. This has He instructed you that you may remember. And moreover, this is my path, which is straight, so follow it, and do not follow other ways, for you will be separated from His way. That this has He instructed you that you may become righteous. Thank you for listening.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is His messenger. May the peace, blessings, mercy and guidance of God be upon you all. So I've been asked to talk about Sharia law this year. It's usually what I get asked to talk about. So the way that I want this to be is I want it to be quite interactive. They said 50 minutes talk and then 10 minutes questions and answers. I don't want to do it like that. I want it to be questions and answers whenever you want. And in fact, I want to start with that. So some of you have come here today with particular curiosities, queries, interests, objections about Sharia, or maybe you want to know more about something, or maybe something doesn't make sense to you from a particular angle, and you want clarification on that or knowledge about that. So I'm going to start off with that. Do you have any questions that you want me to address? Is there anything you want me to address within this presentation? And if not, then I'll do what I was going to do. And then if you put your hand up whilst I'm speaking, that's fine, and you can have questions afterwards as well. Is there anything anyone would want me to address? Yes, what? I heard the yes there. Nothing? Stoning? Homosexuality? Interest? Nothing? You're all good with Sharia? That's good. Yes? About? Obligatory things. Okay. Anything else? That's not so controversial. Something controversial. Anything that you're not happy about and that you want an explanation regarding? Alright, this is going to be boring for me then. So, the first thing you have to know about the name Sharia is that in Arabic the root of the word means the way. So the Arabs would describe the path that water takes down a mountain as the Shara, the way of that. And so Sharia is the way that God has prescribed to man to live according to what He has said. Now in Islam we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything, and then before us He had created the angels and He created the jinn from which Satan came. And in English we call it genie, right, based upon all the Arab stories. And then He created man. He created Adam first, and then He created Eve thereafter. And Adam ate from the tree, not because of Eve, but because Satan had asked him to and whispered to him and tricked him. And then we came down to earth, and you know the story from there. God from the Islamic perspective, we don't believe that he's negligent. We don't believe that he created beings that have free will and free choice, i.e. us and the jinn, because Satan diverted from that which he was asked. So he had free choice, and we have free choice. Whereas, for example, the angels or the animals, they don't have free choice the way that we have. They can't go against that which God has ordained or prescribed for them, but we have. And so God would be negligent if he created us with free choice and then never gave us an instruction manual, right? Now we have the choice to follow that or not, whereas the animals don't. It's inbuilt. They don't have that free choice. Neither do the angels. And so God sent prophets and messengers, beginning from Adam, and the last one being Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so therefore we believe that Sharia is not just something that was given to the Muslims. It was given to Jesus. It was given to Moses in the Torah. It was given to David in the Psalms. It was given to Abraham, etc., etc. And that God sends his way through his messengers and through his prophets. Prophet Muhammad came down with the last way. He is the final messenger. And so therefore his way has to be evergreen and has to be applicable to everyone at all times. There are two sources that from where we derive this way. The Sharia comes from two primary sources. It comes from the Quran, that we believe is the word of God, unedited, unadulterated, the word of God. That's the first and primary source. The second of the primary sources is the tradition or the speaking of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And what I mean by that is that anything he said, or anything that he did as a messenger or as a prophet, in his capacity as a messenger or prophet, not in his capacity as a human being, anything that he saw someone else doing and that he never objected to. Okay? Those two are the primary sources of Islam. We have secondary sources that come from the primary sources. So one of the secondary sources, for example, is that if all of the scholars of Islam agree upon something, then that doesn't change thereafter. And this is very rare. Another one is qiyas, which is that we make an analogy. And so, for example, the alcohol that comes from grapes, this is called khamr in Arabic. We make an analogy to anything else that produces lack of mind the way that alcohol does. And so cider would now have the same ruling as wine. Cannabis would have the same ruling because it's based upon that the mind is lost. Okay? So these are the two secondary sources that everyone agrees upon, and then there are other secondary sources as well. One of them, for example, is that things don't change unless something comes to change them. What that means is that in Islam you are unguilty until proven guilty. You have not committed, you have not perpetrated a crime unless it's proven otherwise. You're born with that initial unguiltiness. That's how you're born. And so therefore, a woman is presumed and a man is presumed chaste unless there is evidence to say otherwise. A man or a woman is presumed not to have stolen unless there is evidence otherwise. Now, Sharia, when we look at it, we find that it's come to preserve five things. It's come to preserve five things, or to work towards the preservation, or to aim towards these five things. The first is that we want to preserve religion. And by religion we mean that we want people to have access to the real way that God has sent down. Number two is that it wants to preserve life. Number three is that it wants to preserve dignity, chastity, and lineage. That's number three. Number four is that it wants to preserve the mind. And number five is that it wants to preserve money or wealth. Each one of these aims or objectives of Sharia has rulings that are derived to achieve these. Does that make sense? And so therefore, with regards to protecting religion, one of the rulings would be to pray. One of the rulings would be that the Quran is available to everyone. One of the rulings would be that fasting. These are all there to preserve the soul and to preserve religion. The second goal our objective is to preserve life. And so therefore murder is illegal, is prohibited. Therefore cutting off a portion of the body is prohibited, is illegal. Therefore, digging a hole where people are likely to fall into it, or making a well and not making barriers around it, all of these things would be prohibited. To preserve the chastity and lineage and honor, adultery or fornication are prohibited. In order to preserve chastity, if someone accuses someone else that they committed adultery or fornication, they have to have 4 witnesses. If they don't have 4 witnesses, then they are to be lashed and not the one who is accused. To preserve it, even if they did it, even if someone actually had illicit or adulterous or went through fornication, if they don't have 4 witnesses, if the people accusing don't have 4 witnesses that saw it explicitly, they can't hold them to account. They are the ones. Why? Because you're presumed chaste until proven guilty. Now you need 4 witnesses. I'm just going to take a bit of a tangent on this. You need 4 witnesses, and the reason why is that the crime isn't for having sex. That's not the crime. The crime is that it was had in such a public way that 4 people saw it. That 4 people saw it. It's very, very difficult for 4 people to see you doing that. Very difficult, unless it was a shameless act, unless it was an act in public. And the witnesses can't be from the act, because then, unless there are 4 of them, which is getting weird. So, does that make sense? So here, what is it that God is trying to uphold or sustain? It's not that sex is illegal outside of marriage, though that is a sin, but that we want to maintain a level of chastity within society. So that when you do something in private, you do it in private. And that's between you and God. And before I carry on to the other 2 objectives, everything within Sharia almost everything has 2 levels to it. There's what is between you and God, and then there's what is between you and other human beings. It's always like that. And so, for example, except maybe from murder, and I'll explain. So with the sex thing, the fornication, there is what is between a man or a woman and God. And so therefore, if they do it in private, fornication, adultery in private, and they don't get caught, then it's a sin between them and God, which they will have to pay for in the Day of Judgment, or they repent. If they get caught with the 4 witnesses, now it becomes a sin that they're committing against society, because they're breaking decency with society in the Islamic framework. With regards to murder, which I mentioned was in order to preserve life, there are 3 rights. There is the right of the one who is murdered, because he just lost a life, she's just lost a life. So her right, okay, the murderer owes her that, or owes him that. There's another right, which is the right of the family of the deceased. So if he or she has children, they have a right upon the killer. He just took something from them. Yeah? So firstly, he took it from the one he killed. Secondly, he took it from the family or the relatives, the one he killed. The one maybe he provides bread, maybe she's the blah blah blah. And thirdly, against God, because God has ordained that a life is not to be taken. A sanctified life is not to be taken. So in that, and I think that's the only exception, there are 3 rights. The right of God, the right of the individual, and the right of society. Whereas usually it's the right of society or the individual, and the right of God. So usually it's just 2 rights, but in murder there's 3. Moving on to the 4th, the preservation of mind. And so therefore alcohol is prohibited. Therefore free education is something that is to be given by the government. Therefore illiteracy is to be eradicated and removed. And there are many, many, many times in history where you saw that there was 0 illiteracy within Muslim countries. This is something that the government is to strive for. Deceiving people in ways that harm them is prohibited. All of this to safeguard the mind. Entertainment that can damage the mind is prohibited. Anything that can damage the mind, whether it's LSD, that can literally rewire the mind, or whether it's something that with time diminishes the mind. And then the final thing is money, the protection of money. And that protection of money, we are actually more capitalist in many ways than capitalism. Because if a man or a woman steals above a particular amount of money, then their hand is cut off to protect money. Now I said before that to protect life, you can't kill someone and you can't cut anything off. But money is such a big deal that there's an exception made here. And you might find that some of these laws seem to be contradictory. And if you have a question, please ask and I'll explain it to you. Otherwise, I'll do my best to guess what it is that you might find a contradiction therein. And so we protect the wealth. So not only is the hand cut off, but the thing has to be returned. But in that ruling is very, 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 very precise. So someone that pickpockets in public, their hand doesn't cut off. Yeah? But someone that breaks into your house and steals something that you hid, then the hand is cut off, so long as it's above a particular amount of money. Okay? And the reason for that is not just the protection of wealth, but if you've ever had your house broken into, you'll know how I've had it. You don't feel safe. You feel that everything, your own home, the one thing you go back to and you sleep in, you can't stay safe there. So it's a big deal. So we want to establish this feeling of safety within society, and so therefore there are very, very specific rules about that. And if someone steals because they don't have enough, they're below the line of poverty, again, nothing happens to them. Now, the objective of Sharia within this particular group is not to cut people's hands off. It's actually not to cut people's hands off. Because after the hand is cut off, if they repeat an offense, then the opposite foot is cut off. Okay, yes, right? But when you look throughout history, 1400 years, and not just in Arabia, but from Spain to China, if you count the number of cases where people have been hopping around with one hand, it won't be more than 5 or 10. Look through the books, they're all written down, cases in court. You won't find repeat offenders. 1500 years almost over that scope of geography. So the point is not to cut people's hands off, it's to stop them from doing that. So much so, for example, that if you go to places like Saudi Arabia, and I'm not a fan of Saudi Arabia, but if you go there, or Qatar, my brother lived there, you give, when you go to pay for your food, you give the man your card, your credit card or your Visa, and you tell them your PIN. You tell them your PIN, and they swipe it, and they take it, and they give you it back. You go and you leave your mobile somewhere, no one will steal it, because they're thinking, £800, hand. £800, hand. I'll keep the hand. Yeah? And there's examples, you go to Dubai, you go to Saudi Arabia, etc., you'll find them, they'll walk out, they'll waddle out of their car, they'll sit down, the car is on, the ignition is on, right? Again, which is wrong because it's against the climate and whatever, and they're wasting this and wasting that. But the point is that they feel safe, because it's not about cutting people's hands off, it's about making people not steal in the first place. Yeah? So those are the 5 objectives of Sharia: to protect religion, to protect life, to protect dignity, chastity and lineage. Number 4, to protect the mind, and number 5, to protect wealth. Now, does anyone have any questions up till now? Is there anything that you've heard about Sharia where you actually know, when you kill the murderer, you're not protecting life, for example? That's a contradiction. Does anyone have anything like that comes to mind that they want clarified? This is the most docile group I've had in my life. I've done this talk at least 8-9 times, up and down the country. This is the first time no one's asked me anything ever. Yes? What about stoning for adultery? What about it? How is that protecting life? Okay. So, sometimes you'll find that there seems to be a contradiction where, for example, we want to protect life. So if we want to protect life and someone kills someone else, why are we then killing the murderer? That's now 2 dead as opposed to just 1. Why can't we just say, okay, 1 dead, that's the end of story? Even with this, there are very, very strict rules. Firstly, in Islam, there are 3 types of murder or killing. There are 3 types. The first is that I intend to kill someone and I kill them. Okay? The second is, I do not intend to kill someone. and I kill him. Okay, those are the two types. There's a third, sorry, there's two types. The first, if I intend to kill someone and I kill them, then it is an eye for an eye and a life for a life. If I don't intend to kill them but I do, then I have to pay blood money. In the first, if the family forgives me, then I pay blood money. Okay, if the family forgives me. And what does family mean? It means anyone within the family. So let's say right now, my wife's pregnant and someone kills me. They have to ask everyone in my family, my brothers, my siblings, my parents, wife and kids. But my wife's pregnant. So they cannot kill the man. They put him in prison, they put him on hold until my son or daughter grows up and reaches the age of consent and asks him, do you want him to be killed? So even in that case, yeah, there's so much room. If one person of the family forgives, then the blood money is paid out, but the person isn't killed. Do you understand? And this is to preserve life for two reasons. Sometimes murder of the murderer is like taking the weeds out of the garden. Yeah, I'm killing the plant, but this plant, if I don't kill it, will kill other plants. Yeah, there's that. There's also, in the same way that, hand, mobile, okay, I'm going to kill him, I know I'm going to die. So am I sure that, I really want to do this or not? Okay? But then there's another thing else. If the person repents and the family feels that, okay, that's it, they've repented, they have the right to forgive. They have the right to forgive. Now, within the case of stoning of the adulterer, remember that I said that the third objective, now these are in priority, meaning that if there ever comes a point where we're at a contradiction between life and chastity, life comes first, usually. If we're ever at a point where, for example, someone stole, but it's ordered to preserve their life because they're that poor, then life comes first. Does that make sense? It's in that order. So religion, and then life, and sometimes they swap, and I'll explain why if you want to. First religion, then life, then chastity, lineage, etc. Then mind, then wealth, in that order. Now when it comes to adultery, what happens in adultery is that, remember, these are two married people, okay? Or well, at least one, the one who's married, he's an adulterer, the other one might be a fornicator. But there's one person who's married. Now in Islam we want to safeguard lineage. And the reason why we want to safeguard lineage is to protect life. Because when you have it within a society, and lots of social studies have shown this as well, when you have it within a society where people do not know who their father is or they do not know who their mother is, life becomes squandered. It's not the same as when everyone knows where they came from. It's not the same in terms of psychology. And I'm a therapist. Why did they leave me? Why I don't know anything. Why did my mother leave me, etc., etc. And so in many cultures it becomes very difficult. And if this is widespread and rampant, then this goes against life and the sanctity and to safeguard life. Because we believe that if a person, even with regards to adoption, for example, we're allowed to adopt, we're allowed to foster, but we're not allowed to change the name of the surname. We're not allowed to change the surname. So if I adopt someone right now, I can't change his surname. Islamically, that would be prohibited, because he ought to know who his father is. And if he doesn't know, no one knows, we just found him like that, then he is to be told that you are not strictly, you're not my son. He's to be told that from the minute that he's able to comprehend this. Yeah? Even though you're not my son, I love you, but you're not from my lineage, because we are to protect lineage. And so adultery is seen as that it breaks that. It breaks that, it also breaks the trust within society. Yeah? And so therefore it's such a grievous sin. But again, only if 4 people see it. And those 4 people have to go to the judge and verbatim they have to say, I saw the ink dip into the ink, the pen dip into the ink, verbatim. Meaning that each one of them has to have seen penetration, verbatim. That's next to impossible, do you understand? The angle of that, 4 people all in one go, and the person, if one person saw you jump up, yeah? But that 4 people see that, it's very, very difficult, do you understand? And so therefore, again, it's not a crime against sex, even if they're married. It's the crime that they were seen by 4 people and they continued. Does that make sense? To safeguard chastity. In Islam, for example, it's everyone's right here to walk in the street and to look up and see the beautiful sky, to look around and see whatever they want to see of nature. That's my right. Islamically speaking, it's actually against my right that I look up and I see a Marks and Spencer advert of lingerie. That's against my right. Because why should I have to fight against whatever desire comes up? Why should I have to be put in a situation where that's always, I mean, they say in psychology that men think about sex every 20 or 30 seconds. I have no idea how they measure this, okay? But they say that. Now just think what that means. You know, you're running your mobile phone and there's always these background apps and then the battery finishes. Just think about what that means then. If it's true that a man's always thinking about sex every 20 or 30 seconds, you know, you're at work, you're doing a job, and oh, you're back to work, right? That's ridiculous. Okay, so we want to provide the freedom to everyone that doesn't transgress upon other freedoms. And there's always an irony in this. There's always going to be an irony in this. In the secular framework, there's an irony, right? You know, I'm free to do whatever I want, so long as I can't stop you from doing whatever you want. Okay, so I can't stop you from doing whatever you want, then you stop me from stopping you. Irony. It's always going to be like that. With regards to freedom, there's always going to be the irony. Yeah? But what we want to achieve within Islam is these 5 things. Protection of religion. Now, sometimes we want to protect life before religion. Okay? Or it seems that way. So for example, if someone believes and there's a gun to his head or a knife to his neck, and they say either you denounce your faith or we kill you. Here, the person is allowed to denounce their faith. So long as they have it inside. They're allowed to say it, but so long as they believe it on the inside. And so here, life is preferred over faith, if he wants. Or he can hang on to it and not say anything, and he's killed as a martyr. However, he has that, why? Because it's temporary. It's temporary. Then he's out, and then he goes back to his faith. Does that make sense? It's a temporary thing. It's not a continuous thing. With regards to, for example, the preservation of faith, you know that we pray 4 units of prayer 3 times a day. But when we're traveling, because of the difficulty of traveling, even though prayer is part of religion, right? It's to safeguard religion. But traveling and the difficulty that comes from traveling is part of the body, which is life. And so here God gives us the ability to pray just 2 units instead of 4. He's given us that license to pray 2 units instead of 4. But religion is above body. But here, because sometimes when you're traveling, it gets so excessive and it's so difficult that you might risk your life or your health would be at risk. And so therefore, as a temporary license, we pray less. And then when we're back and we're not traveling anymore, we then pray normal. Does that make sense? So sometimes it seems that they contradict, but they don't. Is there any questions? Yes. By the way, I don't want Muslims to ask me questions. Yeah? Because when a Muslim asks me a question, it's like, I have a doubt and I want not just Muslims. Yes, but no worries. Blasphemy law.
Exactly. Satisfy public appetite, protect cultural sensitivities, or if that to protect religion, which is the first point you mentioned.
What was what did you call it? Blasphemy? Blasphemy law, okay. So, the blasphemy law, he said, is that to protect, is that just for, so people can sit there and chat, yeah, fight, okay, and see a guy being killed? Or is it that it's to protect religion, or what is it to protect? There are 2 opinions in this. And these 2 opinions were from a long time ago, from the very beginning, basically, even amongst the companions of the Prophet. One opinion is that the blasphemy law is not actually a blasphemy law. It's because if someone leaves the religion and doesn't say anything, no one says anything to them. You're not tested. You don't walk into the mosque and someone says, "Are you still a Muslim?" You don't walk into a shop, "Are you still a Muslim?" Right? So it's not about whether you're a Muslim or not. It's about that you've become enemy of the state or not. And if someone does leave the religion and that's it. That's between them. And there were many times where the Prophet knew that someone was a hypocrite. That he said he was a Muslim and he wasn't actually, and he knew it. And he even made, it wasn't even in secret, but it wasn't like, I'm out to tell everyone, And that was, just swept under the carpet. So it's not actually strictly a blasphemy law. It's more like the enemy of the state. He's become, or she has become an enemy of the state. Does that make sense? Any other questions?
What are the rules of divorce? If let's say, if you say that the five fundamental beliefs of Islam, let's say one of them is not marriage, so how does divorce come into play?
Mosque?
Divorce.
The
Marriage and divorce.
divorce, marriage and divorce. Okay. Okay, good, excellent. That's a good question. So why is divorce allowed in Islam? Okay, good. So, in essence, this is a little bit more philosophical, but the reason why marriage was allowed in Islam in the first place is so that humanity continues. If people couldn't get married, humanity wouldn't continue. Which is one of the reasons why homosexuality is prohibited in Islam, because everyone was homosexual. One generation of homosexuality, then problem solved, so to speak, but then there'll be no humanity. Okay, so that's why marriage was allowed in the first place. Now, so therefore, one of the reasons for marriage is to continue the progeny, to continue with the human race. Divorce is allowed, and the Prophet said that it is the worst of what is allowed. In other words, because in Islam there are 5 rulings on everything. One of 5 rulings. Either something is obligatory, I have to pray, or something is prohibited, I'm not allowed to drink alcohol. Or something is liked, meaning if I do it, God rewards me, but I don't need to. Or something is disliked, meaning I can do it, but if I don't do it, God will reward me. Or something is allowed, and that's it. Yeah, so I'm allowed to wear jeans, that's it, end of story. I'm allowed to drive, end of story. I'm allowed to wear a hat, that's it. I don't get rewarded by God for wearing a hat, okay, unless my intention is not to die, okay, because I'm bald. Or, do you understand? But in its default state, there's nothing prohibited or allowed, it's allowed and that's it. Divorce is that which in its default is hated, but it's allowed. It's hated, but it's allowed, meaning you need a reason in order to divorce. Now, the reason for that is that there are 2 people sometimes where the relationship between them is so toxic, yeah, so toxic that the children will just be poisoned. It's so toxic that them being together is much worse for chastity and progeny and whatever else than them staying together. And so therefore we're not Catholic in that perspective. Do you understand? We're not going to know marriage till death. At the same time, it's not a case of, boyfriend and girlfriend where divorce is an easy thing. It's not like that. Okay? With divorce there are rules as well. One of those rules, for example, is that the man has to continue paying for the woman's livelihood for 3 months after he divorces her, or if she's pregnant until she gives birth. Yeah. And so the man has to think twice about that, because he's not going to go marry another woman and pay for this woman. It's complicated, it's expensive. And so therefore it's actually a hard thing to do, logistically. Yeah. Now when I speak about this, I'm speaking about this from a legal perspective. I'm not mentioning love and hate and romance and Hollywood and Bollywood. Yeah. I'm talking from a legal perspective. From a legal perspective, he has money to pay. He loves her, he doesn't love her, is a different story. Now, divorce is in the hand of the man. And the reason for that is that he's the one that went and asked for the woman's hand, and he's the one that gave her the gift. In the Hindu culture, it's the opposite. It's the man, it's the woman's family that pays the man. Thank you for taking her, and here's the money that you would have spent on her. No, in Islam it's different. In Islam, it's the man that goes, he asks, and he gives the money. Now, it's not that she has to. She's now a prisoner with him for life. No, she can get divorced. Yeah, but by default, it's in his hand. By default, and it's allowed in those cases that I just mentioned, where marriage is such an evil if it continues. It would be so evil if it continued. Then it's allowed. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question? Do you have any others? Sure.
You mentioned homosexuality, but I'm not sure. I believe there are cases where men, they are born with the system of a woman. Outside is a man, or the opposite. What do you do in a situation like that? For instance, your body is a man, but inside of you, like everything is a woman. Like what happens in Islam? How does the religion deal with the situation?
So the question is, what happens when someone is one gender on the outside and another gender on the inside. There are people who are born with both genders physically. Those people that have both genders physically, Islamically, what happens is that they grow up and then they choose. So if they have both organs, they choose. I'm going to carry on as this, or I'm going to carry on as that. That's if they're physically from that perspective. Now, when you say on the inside they're a woman or on the outside they're a man, as a therapist, that doesn't quite make sense to me. From what I know of biology, that doesn't quite make sense to me. And all the way up till now, that was actually seen as a form of body dysmorphia in psychology. It was seen as that someone believes is something that, you know, I'm a cat on the inside. Yeah, that's body dysmorphia. Whether it then turns into bulimia, whether it then turns into excessive eating and they think they're slim, whether they think they're a woman and they're actually a man, whether they think the man is actually a woman, is beside the point. Islamically, we judge it physically. Physically, what exists physically. Yeah, if both exist, he or she chooses, right? But if they're a man, then they're a man, and if they're a woman, they're a woman. Now, from the very beginning, and this is different. It's going to get a little bit undignified, right? Or that's not going to be very subtle from now on. When we talk about sex and intercourse and homosexuality or heterosexuality, etc., from the perspective, from the 30,000 foot view looking down at society, and to make a law for that society, we're not, love, emotions, all these things come into play, but we're more interested in the physical, mechanical aspect of things. Yeah, in the physical, mechanical aspect of things. So, right now, someone who masturbates, what do we classify them as? Do we call them a handist? It's almost late. Okay. Do we call them? Do we say that's a separate category? That's a sexuality? If a man's attracted to another man, okay, or a woman's attracted to another woman, or a man's attracted to a woman, the attraction is one thing, but the physical, mechanical thing is a different thing altogether. Okay, proof in hand that someone could do that with a sheep. Do we have we do have a category for that. Okay, but what I'm saying to you is the categorization doesn't stop the actual physical act of ejaculation. Yeah. So someone is blind, okay, and he thinks he's attracted, or someone who sees and he's attracted to men, but you get a woman to do, but he's blindfolded, and he thinks it's a man. Will he ejaculate? He will. Yeah, because it's at the end of the day, it's a matter of friction. Yeah, there's the mechanics to it. Do you understand? Now, from the very early on, it was noted that men, Muslim men, some of them were scholars, were openly attracted to other men. And when we say love, it was known that some men loved other men more than their wives, but they were married to their wives. But sex was for the opposite gender, and love, whatever. Love your horse if you want. Yeah? But sex is a different story. Does that make sense? That mechanical act is now, if you're lucky enough that you're having sex with someone that you love, then good. Some people can love more than one person. Yeah? But there's a mechanic aspect to it, and that was defined by God. Now again, homosexuality, if it's done in private, where no one knows, then that's a sin between that individual and God. And we maintain that it's a sin. We maintain that it's a sin. Okay? I was on the radio once, BBC West Midlands, and it was me and a Catholic gentleman, and he asked me, is homosexuality a sin? Yes, it's a sin, end of story. The Catholic priest was saying it was a sin without saying it was a sin. And I pulled him up, I said, look, if you're supposed to guide people, then be clear. Is it a sin or not? And at the time, he said that it was, but he wouldn't actually say it. He said, you shouldn't, and da. For us, it's a sin. Yeah. Now, if you're married to a woman, and you're attracted to another woman, what do we say in that situation? We say, hold yourself back. Right? That's what we say. We say hold yourself back. If you're a man and you're married to 4, and you see a little baby and you're attracted to the little baby, what do we say in that situation? We say love the baby, right? But mechanically, no. Do you understand? So we have to separate between the emotions, the emotion of love, and between the mechanics of sex. Yeah? Between the mechanics of sex. That's the way that it is in Islam. And so the love, etc., many times where literally they would love their friend more than they would love their wife. Or she would love her friend more, or she would love her father more than she loves her husband. But who does she sleep with? Yeah. Do you understand? Because once we open that door, it's crazy. So we stop at the mechanics. This is allowed and that's not allowed in yes.
Why is it like you're talking about mechanics of sex? Why is it okay and good between a man and a woman? And why is the mechanic of sex bad between a man and a man?
So what I said before is that sex was allowed in order to continue progeny. The reason why people marry or have sex is to continue progeny. There is it's pleasurable, yeah, there is that part of it, but the main aim behind it is, in every law, is for it to continue progeny, is to continue. Now, if we take the extreme where everyone is homosexual, is a homosexual, there would be no other generation thereafter. If we take the extreme where everyone is heterosexual, we carry on. Yeah, and this isn't just Islam, but before that, Christianity and Judaism, all the way back. Yeah, and whenever it was in Sodom, for example, whenever it was done, they were still married. There are accounts where they're still married, but they're having sex with men, but they were still married. Does that make sense? So now that opens up a question. Well, and this is why in the Quran, that prophet of that time, he said to them, you're spendthrifts. You're overindulging in sex, yeah, because you're married. I mean, you're married. You're enjoying that with your woman. Why are you then doing it with men as well? And some of this exists, for example, in places like Afghanistan, where they're Muslims, they're married, but they also have their toy boys on the side. Yeah, Islamically, that's seen as prohibited. But the answer to your question is for that reason, because marriage is there to make children. It's not my opinion. That's the first thing, it's not my opinion. There have been different rulings, but again, when you ask, is it okay to punish someone? That question is wrong, because we're not punishing them because they're homosexual. We're not punishing someone because he's homosexual. Yeah? I remember in Egypt, I'm Egyptian ethnically, I went back and my cousin, we were walking, and he held my hand like that, like this. I'm walking the street and he held my hand like that, and I just went, nah, okay? And that's absolutely fine with him, yeah? He doesn't see that as anything whatsoever. Okay, walking in the street and someone who's trying to sell you something will come and couple up with you like you're a couple, like elbow with elbow like this, whilst walking with you down the street, and it's like, that's pretty intimate. For me, having grown up in Glasgow and now here, that's intimate. So what I'm saying to you is that there would actually be no way for the government, the police, or anyone to know that two people are homosexual. There would be no way. And there would be no way to punish them. It would be no way. Yeah? And Islamically, a man and a woman shouldn't be snogging in the street. Yeah? French kissing in the street is seen as is quite sexual. Islamically, that wouldn't be allowed. So the heterosexual isn't allowed to do that, even though it's permitted by the state. And the homosexual wouldn't be allowed to do that, even though it's prohibited by the state. They're both equal. But when they close the door and no one sees them, no one can. Do you understand? No one can punish them for something that without 4 witnesses, whether heterosexual or homosexual. Yeah. But the point here is, whether heterosexual or homosexual, are you not practicing sex indecently in the street? That's the point. Does that make sense? So two heterosexual males in one of these societies might look gay to you. You might see me walking with my cousin, you're like, they're gay. Yeah? No 2 ways around it. But no, in that society it's not seen like that. I could love him more than my wife, and there will be no shame in that. What I do behind closed doors is my problem with God. So the punishment thing is a different story. Now with God, you convince God otherwise, not me. That's not my, do you understand? That's not my opinion. So in terms of the freedom The freedom is curtailed to both. Publicly is curtailed to both. They both can't show acts of sex publicly. But behind closed doors, whether it's fornication, adultery, or homosexuality, behind closed doors is between them and God. And that's not a cop-out. Those are the rules. Yeah. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Yes?
You said something about blood money.
Yeah, blood money is the money that you pay if you kill someone accidentally. It comes to about, I mean, inflation up and down, but it comes to about £26,000.
And what happens if someone doesn't have that money? Is there any sort of...
If someone doesn't have that money and he killed him intentionally, then by default he's to be killed. If the family forgives him, then he pays that money. If he doesn't have that money, then he either negotiates with the family, or he borrows that money, or his family pay on his behalf. For example, doctors here in the UK, if a doctor kills a patient accidentally, it wasn't his intention, he has to pay blood money. But it's not him that pays, it would be his union. Does that make sense? Here we call compensation, but it's limited to 24,000. Someone can't ask for 10 million and bankrupt the hospital because an error happened. Yeah. Yes.
Why is wealth given so much importance?
Why is?
Why is wealth given so much importance if it's just a material possession for here or there?
Excellent. Why is wealth given so much importance if it's just material possession and we are here on earth? Very good question. It's very, very good question. So the first thing is, usury, or what is known as interest, is prohibited in Islam. Why is usury prohibited in Islam? Because right now we live in a time of fiat currency. Fiat currency means we make money up, and we assign value to that money. Now let's say that within an economy there were only 10 iPhones. That's all that ever existed. There were only 10 iPhones, and there were only £10 within this economy. How much is that? Every iPhone worth £1, right? Right? Now, if we start using usury, where I say to you, I'm going to give you £1, and just because I give you that £1, nothing else, we've not made any added value, just because I give you that £1, I expect you to give me £1.50 back. If we do that with £10, how much money do we now have? 15. But we've only got 10 iPhones. So now has the value of the iPhone is going to get more expensive, and the value of the money is going to decrease. Yeah? So usury actually wars against the value of money. I mean, inflation happens due to supply and demand, fine. But then when interest comes into it, inflation increases and it exponentiates even more. Yeah? Because even worse. A house right now is 250,000. Okay? It wasn't like that 15, 20 years ago. You could buy the same house for 3,000 or 4,000. That spike, that jump, isn't just because people want to buy houses, because people always wanted to buy houses. Something's happened. Yeah? Something's happened. Interest is a war against value. This is how we see it Islamically. It's a war against value. Now, yes, we live in a material world. However, I can't eat without money. Yeah? I can't. I went to Aldi the other day, and there was a guy sweeping, and he was from one of the he's from Jamaican islands. He's from one of the Jamaican islands, and he's sweeping. And he said to me, "Oh, if only." He saw me like with bags shopping. He said, "If only money was food was free, would be good." And I said, "Where are you from?" And he told me. I said, "Well, you live on the beach. You've got coconuts. Food was free." He said, "Yeah, it was." I said, "So why on earth did you come here? Yeah, it's freezing, sunny, beach, coconuts. Why are you here?" He said, "Yeah, fine. But what happens when my wife gets ill? What happens when I need clothes because they stopped us from hunting to safeguard nature? So now I have to go to H&M and buy, but with what?" Do you understand? So there's a realistic thing to Islam, which is that, yes, we are spiritual souls, but we have physical bodies. And the spiritual soul can only exist within this physical body in this life. And so the physical body needs to be nurtured. And so in order to nurture the physical body, which is the second of the objectives, money has to be upheld. And so, for example, before what used to happen is if you took a debt with interest and you didn't pay it, they would literally take a pound of flesh. Or they'd take you as captive. You'd become a slave. Or your wife, or your whole family, depending upon the deal. If you can't pay it back with this amount, then your whole family are slaves. That's prohibited in Islam. Yeah? Because money is used to subjugate. And if you look now at the international banks, etc., and the loans that they give back, it's a form of war. It's controlling another country using money. Yeah? And so we have to be realistic about these things. Does that make sense? And as a law, that's there, not just, when I said Islam is a Sharia, it's a way of life. It's not just a religion, it's a way of life. And so therefore we have laws for money. We have laws for marriage and divorce. And not just laws for fasting and praying and going on pilgrimage. That's seen as like a sixth of the religion. The rituals that you would otherwise think a religion was, in Islam is not. In Islam, that's less than 20% of the religion. Does that make sense? Much less than 20%. Whereas in Islam, what's more, and the scholars always say, you know what, fasting, praying, those things are for babies. When you're learning these things, that's, you know, those are the basics. That's primary school stuff. It starts getting very complicated when you start going into financial dealings. When you start going to marriage and divorce, it becomes very complicated. He said this, she did that, etc. That's where the religion is. That's where the way of life comes into play. Yeah, that's where Islam. So Islam is not just rituals.